Yo, what's good? It's your boy Wick to the Split, and I'm back with another boxing prediction. I could say, um, Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao versus Nate Diaz. Now, this is not a fight that's being talked about. This is not a fight that's happening. Um, this is just like a little, like a little fantasy match that I just decided to just drum up. But Nate Diaz, you know what? I would be curious to see. I would be super curious to see how Nate Diaz would actually do in a boxing ring. I'd honestly, I'd like to see that, cause Nate Diaz has got some boxing skill. I ain't even gonna front on that shit. I mean, I've watched him fight, and the motherfucker has some hands. I ain't even gonna lie about that shit. The motherfucker has hands. He's got a long reach, and he's got good accuracy. And another thing is, to go to show how good of boxing skill he has, I watched that first fight with him and with the Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor in the first fight, and before Nate Diaz choked Conor McGregor out, he was fucking Conor McGregor up. I'm talking about like he was like outboxing him, and he was outboxing Conor McGregor so badly that McGregor tried to go for a takedown, and like a stupid motherfucker, it got backfired, and then Nate Diaz choked him out. But I always told myself, if Conor McGregor didn't go for that takedown on Nate Diaz, could Nate Diaz have knocked Conor McGregor out? And I'm not gonna lie to you, I think that he could have. I'd be curious to see how Nate Diaz would do in a boxing ring. The motherfucker has hands. Another person I'd be curious to see is fucking Ronda Rousey. I love Ronda Rousey. Shout out to Ronda Rousey. Good luck in your fight, girl. She's like everyone. She is literally like a real life superwoman. She is fucking unbelievable. Um, but Ronda Rousey's got hands also. I'd be curious to see her get into a boxing ring also. But I'd be super curious to see how Nate would do in a boxing ring. I know he's got that motherfucking that Sacramento slap that he always does. I mean, I don't know if he'd be able to do that, because I see lots of fighters go, they go to MMA, and I see some fighters that I've seen fighters in the past try to go from MMA and then they go over to boxing, and they realize they can't do the stuff in boxing that they usually do in MMA. Like, you can't kick, you can't headlock, you can't do all that shit. And it kind of throws them off. You know what I'm saying? But I'd be curious to see Nate Diaz going into boxing, because he's got hands. He's got good hands. I mean, I don't know if Nate Diaz would be an entertaining fighter. You know what I mean? I ain't gonna lie to you. It's not like Nate Diaz is a killer or nothing like that. Because he can't, like, I don't know, like, he doesn't have like super amazing power. Like, it's not like Nate Diaz is a killer or anything. But Nate Diaz, he can punch as far as like box. Like, he's a good boxer. You know what I mean? And like I said, in the fight with him and Conor McGregor, the first fight I'm talking about, um, I was always just curious if Conor McGregor didn't go for a takedown, could Nate Diaz have choked? I mean, could he have knocked Conor McGregor out? Because like I said, in their first fight, Conor McGregor was getting fucked up in the last round. Conor McGregor was getting fucked up, and then he tried to go for a takedown on Diaz, and then it backfired. Then Diaz choked his ass out. And that's what I was always curious about, is could Nate Diaz have knocked Conor McGregor out right then and there if McGregor didn't go for a takedown. But I'd be very curious to see how Diaz would do in boxing, as well as Ronda Rousey, because I've watched Ronda Rousey, and Ronda Rousey is unbelievable too. Her hands are unbelievable, and I watched some footage of Ronda Rousey back in 2011 on her throwing punches and hitting the pads. Her hands weren't fast, they weren't nothing at all, and I've seen how much she's increased her hand speed and her foot speed and her angles and her power, how she generates. Ronda Rousey's unbelievable. She is a real life superwoman. She's a real life Wonder Woman. I love Ronda Rousey, straight up. Who doesn't? Um, I know that Nate Diaz has that Sacramento slap that the motherfucker does. I know he wouldn't be able to do that shit in boxing. He wouldn't be able to pull that off. Or he wouldn't be able to do no fucking Sacramento slap in boxing. But I think nonetheless Nate Diaz would be an entertaining fighter to watch. And I know that you know, and even though he's not a boxer, Nate Diaz, even though he's not a boxer, if Nate Diaz went to boxing, he would get like a lot of attention. Like even though he'd be like fucking what zero, like his professional debut, like Nate Diaz would fucking, he'd be a box office draw. Why? Because he's already a superstar in the fucking UFC. So if he went to boxing, he would already be like a superstar. Like fucking, there'd be people watching him already. Like there'd be like, he'd be a box office draw easily. So Nate Diaz wouldn't have to worry about people watching him. That's for sure. But I think Nate Diaz would be an entertaining fighter. He wouldn't be a killer, like I said. You know what I mean? Because Nate Diaz is not no like huge puncher. He's not like he's fucking like knocking the fuck out of people. You know what I mean? So I'd be curious to see him though in a boxing ring, just to see how he would handle himself, because he seems to be able to handle himself pretty good in the octagon. So, and honestly, if you think about it, in the octagon, in the cage, in the UFC cage, it's more dangerous than a boxing cage, because you know what I mean, like the fight can end easier in a boxing I mean UFC cage in the octagon, because you know what I mean, like just like one fucking like kick to the head could just like end the whole fucking thing. So realistically, like what, like in the octagon it's more dangerous. But like I said, you know, I'd be super curious to see this fight. To see, I mean, to see this fight, I'd be super curious to see Nate Diaz get in a boxing ring. Only because, you know, I mean, he shows how much boxing skill he has in MMA. So yeah, I'd be curious to see him fight in a boxing ring. But would it ever happen? Who knows? You know what I mean? People go over to different sports and shit like that all the time. Like Michael Jordan went over to baseball. I don't know what the fuck he was doing there. But yeah, you guys leave a comment and tell me what you guys think. And if you can, you guys can please subscribe. Subscribe to me. Thank y'all. And I'll be back. I'll be back.